Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Themba Garimbo of being a himbo, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on Monday the 20th, following a weekend of MMA stepping out of the limelight. It was very much boxing's weekend, because we had a once in a, well, I suppose for a lot of my listeners, a once in a lifetime event. It's been 20 years, 21 years, 19 years. Or was it 2003? It's been 20 years since we had a unified heavyweight champion of the world. Lennox Lewis retired in 2003 as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. The knobheads who own all the belts in their separate little organisations all decided on different people to be the champion after that. And then we never got the correct amount of unification fights. So the belts have been floating all over the place. And for, it's always been someone's had a lot of them and someone else has had one. Vladimir Klitschko had 3 of them for a long time, while his brother had 1 and they wouldn't fight. Anthony Joshua had 3 of them for a while, while Deontay Wilder had 1, and Tyson Fury had the lineal and invisible belt. But now we got to the position where, following Usyk beating Joshua for his 3 belts, and then doing the mandatory rematch that you have to do if you ever beat anyone who's expected to beat you in boxing, if you ever beat anyone good who's famous, you have to do it twice. That's the rules. And it's funny because that's why Usyk's about to be stripped of one of his belts in about a week. But following 2 wins over Anthony Joshua to make sure that he hadn't fluked it, they finally got this Tyson Fury match together. Tyson Fury did dodge, dip, duck, dive, and dodge to try and get around it, but they finally put it together. I don't think Tyson Fury was ever scared of him, obviously, but Tyson Fury loves doing the least amount of work for the most amount of money. He loves a tune-up, and he looked bad in his tune-up against Francis Ngannou. But these guys were supposed to fight in December, which is why a lot of people suspected that the judges sided with Fury in the Ngannou fight, because it would have been very embarrassing if they had this once-in-a-generation heavyweight unification coming up in December, and he lost in the same arena 6 months earlier. So they had this coming up, and then Fury got cut. They pushed it back, and fair play to everyone involved, it still went ahead. That is, with how the heavyweight division has been in the last, 20 years, that could have been as close as we got to the unification. Because the combination of Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, and Deontay Wilder, only one of those permutations has happened yet. Anthony Joshua hasn't fought Deontay Wilder since they both lost their belts. Tyson Fury never fought Joshua, or Joshua never fought Fury. It's always been the way that it's like, it's easier for me to just keep my belts and keep doing what I'm doing. So respect to everyone involved, especially our Saudi boxing overlords, for just throwing money at this until it had to happen. And fair play to them as well, because they are working on the rest of the heavyweight division. They've been booking AJ fights, they've been booking Wilder fights, they've been getting everyone involved. Joseph Parker's coming up, and that was at a Saudi event. The cards are actually pretty bloody good. Generally at these Saudi events, where boxing is often accused of being a sport where you have a headliner and then a load of guys just beating up soup cans to pad their records on the way up to that. Undercard is a term that's used very derisively in boxing, where the undercard in MMA it's still something that people want to watch. Though I will have a good moan about the undercard of the UFC event when I'm done talking about this fight. But Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, probably the most extreme clash of physiques in the heavyweight division, because Usyk came up from cruiserweight with the expectation that he was going to have to do some work, and everyone was going, oh, he's a bit small for the weight class. And Kyle McLaughlin did a very interesting, Kyle McLaughlin, snarky Twitter personality, not Kyle McLaughlin of Twin Peaks fame. But he did a great Twitter thread talking about Usyk's past, and he was on Heavy Hands, and they had a good chat about that too. But I didn't realise Usyk had entered a amateur tournament against some of the world's top heavyweights and done very well in that beforehand. But yes, his strength has always been his quickness and mobility for a heavyweight and for a cruiserweight, but it was very interesting watching him come up, because at cruiserweight, because his last fight at cruiserweight was Bellew, and he just battered him. But he was obviously coming up to fight much bigger men, and more than anything else, when light heavyweights come up to heavyweight, used to be light heavyweights come up to heavyweight, we've got cruiserweight now, but when cruiserweights come up to heavyweight, that's the big change. The men up there are much bigger, and they could typically take punches a lot better. Or take your punches as a smaller man much better. Meanwhile, Tyson Fury is obviously the other end of the ridiculous spectrum because he is like the biggest heavyweight. Well, not quite, but one of the biggest heavyweights. 6'7". His height's all over the place. It's listed differently everywhere. When you see him in photos next to Francis Ngannou, you go, is he really 6'7"? But then when you saw these two together, you were going, bloody hell, that's quite a big height disparity. And it was only supposed to be 4 inches build. But Fury's fascinating because where Joshua and Wilder, I used to say this all the time when there were the three kings thing going on, where Joshua and Wilder were big athletic lads who quite late in the day for a boxing career, someone took him aside and said, hey, you're pretty big and athletic. Do you want to try boxing? I think AJ started at 18 as an amateur, and Wilder, I think, started later than that, like 20 maybe, which is obviously, in any other sport, if you start that late against people, in a sport where people start from, the moment they can hold gloves, you're a bit behind. But Tyson Fury comes from a boxing family, obviously big traveller boxing tradition, but more than that, his father was a heavyweight boxer and was obsessed with making one of his sons the heavyweight champion of the world. He was named Tyson Fury after Mike Tyson. And, he boxed from birth almost, and then he happened to grow into this 6'7" monster. I mean, John Fury's a pretty big man, but he's like 6'3", which again is like Usyk's height. But to be a kid growing up in boxing and then to have all these fantastic physical attributes put on top of that is a real treat. And don't let people tell you that Tyson Fury isn't fantastically physically gifted, because they look at the love handles and the bald head and they go, well, he looks like a dad who's stripped off and challenged everyone to a fist fight. But his height, his speed, his reflexes, his chin, I mean, we don't say enough about the chin, but the shots that he took from Wilder in their fights, while he put on a blinder in the first fight and then he bullied him around in the other two, the big difference was that everyone else did get caught by Wilder eventually, and Tyson Fury did still get caught by Wilder eventually and shook it off, just got up and went, right, back to work. So enormously physically gifted. And that is a huge deal in the heavyweight division, where people can just theoretically, people can get bigger forever. We've been talking about Lennox Lewis, and I believe, what was Lennox Lewis's reach? Was it like 84 inches? The magic John Jones number? Yeah, 84 inches, 6'5". Going to have a hard time getting past that jab. Even if he didn't have the best jab or one of the best jabs in the heavyweight division, the physical attributes would make it so that he has a pretty effective jab. So all of that was to say that Tyson Fury is not used to dealing with smaller, faster people to this degree. There was the famous example of like Steve Cunningham back in the day when he was on his way up. I think he was a light heavyweight, came up, and he famously knocked down Tyson Fury. But Tyson Fury's used to being the biggest man, but also deceptively fast, and dealing with these big heavyweights like Chisora and White. Meanwhile, Usyk, while he's been coming up from cruiserweight, he's had to deal with some big men like Chisora and Anthony Joshua, Daniel Dubois, he's a big old bruiser. Never someone like 6'7", who can also box a lot better than most of those guys. One thing, while we're on the subject of like Fury being the big heavyweight or the biggest heavyweight, that I was noticing during this fight, in the pre-fight preamble, the weigh-ins, Fury weighed in 262 and Usyk weighed in, they kept saying it was 234, but I think it was 224, the actual number on the scale. But 260 and 220. Ngannou weighed in just a smidge under 280 when he fought Tyson Fury. That is a big fucking dude. But anyway, the fight, let's get into it. What I really liked was, Usyk's footwork has always been beautiful. He moves wonderfully for a big man. It's bouncy, it's rhythmic. He uses his in and out motion to lull the opponent into just to fatigue people. If you use a lot of bouncing motion generally, backwards and forwards, or just in your stance, or you're just waving your hands, anything that you can do moving in the opponent's vision throughout the entire fight does well at hiding your punches and your entries, because it's quite fatiguing to have to try and discern real actions from fake rhythmic actions. But he doesn't waste an awful lot of movement either. It's all very sort of measured. There's always these comparisons to Lomachenko because they're friends and they're both Ukrainian. They're both southpaws and they both like moving a lot. But it's a lot more contained than Lomachenko dancing around people. as you would expect, because he's a 6'3" man weighing in at 220. What I really loved in this fight, though, getting into the details, was Usyk's ability to make ground on both his jab and his left hand. So a lot of the good connections in this fight, because Tyson Fury can just drop away or lean back, and there's so much distance opened up because he's so tall and he's so long, and then he leans back on top of it and off to the side. Usyk did a beautiful job, and this is kind of like basic stuff, but he does it so well and so smoothly because he's done it hundreds of thousands of times over his career. But when you jab and you move your lead foot, if you're throwing like a combination on the bag, or you're throwing a combination against someone who's quite close to you, you jab and your lead foot goes with your jab. And then as you throw your rear hand, your rear foot comes up to shorten the stance again. Because every movement you make, you want to extend the stance and then contract it up to where it was again. You lengthen your stance and then you shorten it back to its regular length. So front foot, back foot if you're advancing, and then back foot, front foot if you're retreating. But because people want to throw a 1-2, they throw the jab with the lead foot, and then they throw the rear hand as the rear foot comes up to, correct the stance back to its original length. When you want to make ground, and you know the opponent's going to drop away from your jab, you got options. You can like try and double jab and get on top of him, but you can also jab and take both steps on the jab. But you got to be quick. You got to go front foot, back foot on the jab. And then you've got to go front foot again as you throw your rear hand. So Usyk's going jab, front foot, back foot, scuttling them up. And then he's going left hook or left overhand as he steps forward again. And he's taking 3 steps in the space that most people take like 1 or 2. But he makes that extra ground. And if you watch the first couple of rounds, he keeps landing that wide left around Fury's right hand. And he keeps making the distance on him. And he keeps sliding down the outside of the lead foot as he does it too. But then when he gets Fury to the ropes, he's much more traditional in his footwork. He goes jab, lead foot goes in, and then he steps in with his left. Then he steps in with his left straight, and his left foot comes up, and then he continues combination punching. But it's just that 2 punches, 4 steps thing that he's got going, and he's so smooth doing it. And it was really important in this fight because even at the heavyweight division is all about power and counter punching and openings. You're standing in front of the opponent, and when the moment that they get close enough and open up, you want to batter them with a big punch. So there's a lot of guys at heavyweight who still sort of do that falling forwards when they're throwing punches. I was talking about it the other day with in MMA with Jose Aldo, who's like one of the better boxers in MMA. But until very recently, until his last fight against Jonathan Martinez, where he really fixed this up after having 3 professional boxing fights in his sort of hiatus, he'd throw punches and he'd sort of lean forward so his shoulders would come forward of his hips, and he'd be sort of falling forwards onto his lead foot and really stretching the stance out. And in the Martinez fight, he did a much better job of moving his feet underneath him all the time and staying upright. And that's what Usyk was doing beautifully here, and he was able to cover huge amounts of ground against a guy who was trying to lean back and give ground and lean back and let him fall short. And it was how he was able to land that overhand over and over again on Tyson Fury. Worked really well. Because Tyson Fury does a lot of like go to the ropes and lean back out over the top rope, and or lean out to his right side. And because he's so tall and long, that gives people a lot of trouble. But because Usyk was able to get almost on top of him off the jab, he could throw the left hand long and catch him leaning. Really liked Usyk's jab to the body. I always like Usyk's jab to the body because he's a southpaw against orthodox opponents most of the time. Normally that lead hand, it's especially like in the heavyweight division. If you watch Anthony Joshua's fights against southpaws, it's always the lead hand is pouring at the opponent's lead hand, and Usyk brings it in, and then he goes to the body. He coils his body first, like squares up, and steps in and jabs the body with some real weight behind it. So jab and left straight to the body were really good at scoring points for him and creating the openings to go upstairs later. First couple of rounds, he got ahead because Tyson Fury was busy showboating while losing the rounds, which is really stupid. But middle rounds, Tyson Fury starts finding the uppercut and the right hook to the body, or the right uppercut to the body. The right body dig, we'll call it. The right body dick at several points. If you want to see what a smooth operator Tyson Fury is regarding like ringcraft and ring awareness, most of the time when he came in, or Usyk was coming in on him out in the open, he'd step in and he'd dig the right uppercut to the body just above the waistband. Beautiful shot, really was affecting Usyk. But the moment that the referee was behind one of their backs, that shot went straight south of the border. That went straight into the cup, and it really annoyed Usyk. And almost like, hitting someone in the jewels is pretty valuable, but almost the anger you can get out of them from it is worth something too, because you're dealing with a very smooth operator in Usyk. If you can get him off his game by just fouling the shit out of him and him feeling like him being incredulous that you're being allowed to do it. If you watch the two really blatant low blows in this fight, they're both that right uppercut, but from underneath the crotch into the groin. Usyk gets angry and he motions at the ref, and the ref comes in and goes, "Hey, keep it clean, lads." And he says it to both of them because he's not seen the shot. Whereas if he was around the other side of them, not obscured by one of the fighters' backs, and then Fury had gone for it, he'd see it clean and go, "What the hell are you doing, man?" Or he'd give him a soft warning and say, "Next one's a hard warning," as we do in MMA. 3 more of those and I'm taking a point. But the body dig with the right hand was important because it set up these beautiful right uppercuts. He landed the right uppercut on his own early on. I think maybe round 2, round 3. Landed a good one, coming off the ropes. Then he starts establishing this right hand to the body and closing in on Usyk. When Usyk steps in on him, he closes with the right hand to the body. And then he starts bringing it up to the jaw with the uppercut. And he hit Usyk a couple of really nasty ones. Well, I mean, Usyk went to the hospital afterwards with a broken jaw, or a suspected broken jaw. But a couple of these really looked like they hurt Usyk. He looked stunned by a couple of them. And, that looked to be a really dangerous punch. But about round 7, Usyk starts... He's been committing to the body with his body jab and his left straight. And then around 7, he comes upstairs again. He steps in deep and he throws a good left straight. Blasts Tyson Fury right in the nose, and Tyson Fury gets a little bit more respect for him. Has to start keeping his hands at home a bit more. And then round 8, Usyk dings him hard a couple of times as well. And then I think it was round 9, the knockdown comes, and that really does change the face of the fight. Knockdown was great because he caught Tyson Fury just doing his usual funny business. Tyson Fury will go jab, right straight, and then he'll throw a right backhand after the right straight has missed. And it was in the course of that he got counterpunched. And then he got hit immediately after that, throwing the right straight and trying to shoulder roll down behind his right shoulder, which of course left him open on the left side, so he took a right hook to the head that really hurt him as well. He was careening all over the ring like a pinball, and someone said he was bouncing off the ropes like the DVD logo, which I thought was fantastic. But the interesting thing in boxing is, like, refs always get called into question after these fights, like, oh, maybe you should have stopped it, maybe you should have done this, maybe did the ref give him extra time there? But anytime you fall into the ropes, as in the ropes stop you from just falling over, that's a knockdown. And I feel like Tyson Fury hit the ropes like 3 times and then the ref called it a knockdown. And it was interesting because I saw people saying you don't get these exciting moments in MMA, but real MMA fans saying this. And I think part of it is because of those constraints. You have to stay on your feet. The opponent can only punch you. The more sensible thing in MMA would be to, like, take someone down or just grab their head and start kneeing them. No follow-ups on the floor, of course. I mean, that's part of what... When people talk about, like, CTE in boxing versus MMA, someone said boxing has, like, 13 deaths a year on average, and MMA's had, like, 14 ever. I think it was Luca Fury pointed that out the other day. But a large part of it seems to be that because if you get knocked down in boxing, you might well be suffering from a concussion. You're then made to stand up and continue fighting. In MMA, if you get knocked down, chances are pretty good. If you're hurt badly, the opponent's going to jump on you. Even if you're, like, just out of sorts for a moment, the opponent's going to jump on you, land enough extra shots that the ref calls it off. In boxing, you get a break. I'm not saying a break like a rest, but you get a break from the opponent hitting you long enough to stand up and go back to the opponent hitting you on the feet. So yes, it was very dramatic though, watching him careen all over the ring. Got himself back together. I thought one of the interesting things in this fight was the clinch, because it was such a factor in the Ngannou fight. Fury's inability to clinch, because he does it to take breaks. He does it to lean on people. If you watch the second Wilder fight, Deontay Wilder has not been told, like, anything about the clinch. And a lot of high-level boxers are absolutely clueless about the clinch. It used to be much more of a feature, but because refs have become more oversensitive to two fighters coming together because of the fear of cuts from headbutts and things, it's sort of died out. It's a lost art for a lot of fighters. And I say this a lot, like, in defensive clinics in boxing, normally it's the case that one man knows how to clinch and the other man doesn't. Floyd Mayweather's hardest fights, probably like Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto, in every instance that Floyd Mayweather closes on him, he posts his head in front of Mayweather's jaw, creates space between their chests, frees at least one hand, and starts hammering. Which is that was quite a popular skill in the old days, in like the golden age of boxing. But it's just, if you don't let guys have to fight there and work it out, people don't get good at it. And people don't teach it. So Fury gets like 3 points for being a defensive genius when really he just hugs people a lot of the time. But if you remember the Wilder fight, like Wilder would come in with his head low and immediately Tyson Fury would go pull his head down, forearm on the back of it and lean on him. Because you get the choice between trying to hold yourself up and really straining your neck and all the very small muscles in your back as you bend over, or putting your hands on the floor and going down to the floor and then having to pick yourself up again. It's tiring stuff. If you watch Cotto versus Mayweather, Mayweather tries it a couple of times and Cotto like picks him up. He stands up straight, and because it's less effort to carry Floyd Mayweather's weight in a nice upright position than it is to keep trying to stand up while he's pulling you down, or go down to your hands and knees and then stand up again. And if you're watching this one, there's a couple of occasions where Tyson Fury tries to pull Usyk down, and it's the most significant height advantage he's had in a little while, so he's got a good chance of doing it just from standing too. But he tries to pull Usyk down, and Usyk does a duck under. He goes underneath Tyson Fury's armpit and looks up and across Fury's back at his other shoulder, starts circling around him. Basic wrestling stuff, but something that he clearly drilled because he went to it immediately when Tyson Fury started trying to snap him down. And then the clinches, he wasn't posting his head or anything, but he was keeping his hands in tight, doing what Andy Ruiz does in clinches. If you keep your hands up like goalposts and let the opponent hug around you, and you don't lock yourself in place by hugging back, which is what a lot of fighters do because they go like, well, we're in a tie-up now, I'll just hold him so that he can't hit me. Andy Ruiz has had amazing success with this. Just keep your arms tight, let the opponent lean on you, give up fighting for a second, and then push him out and hit him in the head. Because like, if the referee doesn't say break, you are free to hit the guy. So if they break from you or you push them away, you can hit him in the head. Pushing's technically illegal, but it's one of those grey area rules, like clinching generally. So it was really good to see Usyk prepared for the funny business in the clinch. Fury tied up a few times and got a couple of breaks, but he didn't do it nearly as often as the second Wilder fight is just him abusing the clinch. Fight ended. Tyson Fury gives a terrible post-fight interview, much like Anthony Joshua, a concussed post-fight interview. I mean, we got to the point in the UFC, they were bringing it back briefly, but we got to the point where we were like, we're not going to interview people who've just been knocked out anymore. I feel like we just shouldn't interview the loser generally, and maybe even don't interview the winner, because people just... If you've been through a professional boxing match for 10 rounds, you've probably got some swelling in your brain. You're going to say weird stuff. But it was very moving to hear Usyk talk about his father in the post-fight interview, the post-fight press conference, because he lost his father and he just said, like, someone said, like, how do you feel? And he just said, I miss my dad. Oh, getting choked up even remembering it. It was just, a really great first answer to the question, like, how do you feel about unifying the world titles? But they interviewed Tyson Fury afterwards, and he's like, he had a great fight, but I feel like the judges were on his side because his country's at war. It was up there with Valentina Shevchenko saying the judges were on her side because she's Mexican and it's Mexican Independence Day. It's like, you're fighting in Las Vegas. What the fuck are you talking about? And she's going to be one of the coaches on The Ultimate Fighter that's coming back. And I think people are going to be I think people are going to be shocked at how bonkers she is, because she seems quite like a child in the very scant footage there is of her outside of like performing kickboxing routines with her sister. But anyway, good fight, I thought. A lot of schadenfreude because, Fury had been getting annoying. I titled my Boycast episode last week, Tyson Fury Fatigue, because I was just bored of talking about him. But, if he comes back and he wins the rematch, that would be very impressive because Usyk's clearly a generational talent in boxing. It's always interesting to see light heavyweights and cruiserweights come up and win the world heavyweight title. It's really impressive. The Evander Holyfields of the world. It was nice to see Vladdy ringside. Looking old, though. And it's only been a couple of years since his fight with Joshua, where he was like the best shape of his life. He looked incredible. I mean, he must have been on some incredible sauce for that one, but that's the best any 42-year-old man has ever looked. And he gave Joshua hell. But yeah, he was there, and that was nice to see. I didn't see Vitali. who is the mayor of Kiev. Might have more important things going on, if we're honest. The downside is, and I said this before the fight and I said it after the fight, before I even noticed the IBF thing, but the reason that it wasn't the reason that no one has been able to unify the belts is because they have 4 belts, or 4 belts that are considered like the heavyweight title. And those bodies don't want the belts on the same people. Every time someone wins all 4, it's like, yeah, amazing, you've sorted it out, you've fixed it. You collected the Infinity Stones. You've healed the fracture. And then it's like, no, the reason that they exist is to have their own champion and to make their own money. It's a massive grift. These bodies do nothing. Like, if they all agreed on who was the champion and that was just the end of it, there wouldn't be a point in them existing. So they're going to look for the earliest possible opportunity to get each of them are going to look for the earliest possible opportunity to get their belt off Usyk by some technicality bullshit. I was looking back at Lennox Lewis's reign, and I think there's like 3 or 4 times that the various governing bodies or sanctioning bodies or whatever they are, the people who own the belts, tried to get them off him for not fighting who they wanted him to fight. When he was like lining up fights with Evander Holyfield, they were like, you need to fight Chris Bird or John Ruiz or some shit. And if you don't, we're stripping you. And apparently, though I was pointing this out in a couple of months, they'll probably start making noise about Usyk not defending the belt against their correct challenger. It's already happening. Because the IBF want their man, Filip Hrgovic, whose name I can't say. He's apparently overdue for a mandatory because they did this unification fight. The way that it works is the ranking bodies, to save face, they prioritize unification fights, and they're supposed to be like, well, that doesn't, don't worry about your mandatory if you're unifying the titles. But basically, he's got to fight him in the next 30 days or lose the IBF belt. Unbelievably petty and stupid, and just, obviously a cash grab. Because I don't have the breakdown on each body's fees for this, but Miguel Cotto had 1 middleweight belt a little while ago, and he vacated it because they were asking for $250,000 to sanction him to fight the next time, or to sanction their belt being on the fight. And he was like, I'm Miguel Cotto. I'm a legend of the sport. I don't need this belt. But it'll be good while it lasts, so enjoy the next couple of weeks with an undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. So we had the UFC. It was filler. We've got this venue, we've got this warehouse, we're paying to have the lights on, better have some fights. So, main event was Lerone Murphy versus Edson Barboza. I'm still sort of like lost on how good or not Lerone Murphy is, because he looked really good, but Edson Barboza has been slipping. I mean, Sadiq Yusuff was battering him, and then tore his shoulder out and lost the rest of the fight. But Lerone Murphy looked good. My criticism coming into this fight was like, there's not like a standout thing he does on the feet as a striker, which is where he's mostly known. As a grappler, he tends to sort of survive the round and then get back to work in the next round. But it's like 1s and 2s off both stances, which, fair enough, that is a decent strategy. But I was saying with Barboza, there are things that stand out. You go like, oh, he's got a wicked left body kick. He's got a wicked right low kick. He's got a wicked wheel kick. Great left hook to the body. Great pivoting left hook. Whereas Lerone Murphy is jabs and right straights, or jabs and left straights, and jabs and overhands. Or jabs and right hooks, which is really weird. He doesn't take his head offline at all. But I think what did impress me in this one was that it was bare bones, as in like meat and potatoes, not bare bones, fundamental stuff. But there was a lot of feinting, and he did really well with that. So he'd fake steps in, he'd shoulder fake, and he had Edson Barboza sort of paralyzed right in front of him, which is really impressive, because I said like the kind of fight you don't want to have against Edson Barboza is staring at him, because he's so fast. Where everyone else who's had success against him, typically putting him under pressure, keeping him on the back foot, keeping his legs locked down so he can't kick that well, and keeping him trying to run around while you're hitting him. But Murphy, did just stand there and fake Edson Barboza into this sort of like timidity. And then he opened up with his own punches, did some decent work kicking on his own, actually. A couple of nice kicks in there. Checked the low kicks or evaded them well, hinging at the knee, bringing his front foot back to his rear knee, which we loved. Not the Aldo pivot, but the Aldo evasion. Had Edson in some hairy spots. Murphy's a good hitter, and Edson Barboza is getting long in the tooth. I don't know if he was great at taking a shot, ever, to be honest. He's always... I won't say chinny, but he's never been like super durable in terms of like big punches. You know, he was super durable in that he made Khabib try to beat him to death. So yes, really good performance from Lerone Murphy. Still a bit sort of confused by how good or not he is because Edson Barboza is in decline. But this is the thing with Lerone Murphy, even a step forward is sort of like, what's going on? Because he managed to get the main event in the Apex on the card that no one watched because there was much more important stuff happening in boxing. And he's already 32. I feel like he's going to fight a top 10 contender at age 35. And it'll be like competing against a Canelo fight or something like that. Yeah, don't know what to make of him. It'll be interesting to see him fight another guy on the up in his prime. I was really looking forward to that Nathaniel Wood fight. There's a guy whose momentum's just died because he chose to fight in Abu Dhabi where they let Muhammad Naimov cheat his arse off. So other stuff on that card, Chaos Williams banged out Carlston Harris pretty quickly. I mean, you know, they were popping at each other. Carlston Harris threw a 1-2 and Chaos Williams covered up and came back with a right hook. You know, standard Chaos Williams. First round, first minute or two. Very explosive. Adrian Yanez got back in the win column, which was good, but I mean, man, looking at this matchup beforehand, Vinicius Salvador, he looked decent on the Contender Series because he was fighting Shannon Ross, who obviously went on to be one of the worst fighters to ever be in the UFC, but lost his UFC debut and then lost against CJ Vergara, who is really not very good. And then he came up in weight to fight Adrian Yanez, who's like a top 15, top 20 guy. And his thing is mainly that he's a striker, and you could see from very early on, like he was throwing punches and he was doing the activity, but he threw like he switched southpaw and threw a left body kick, and it landed on Yanez's arm, and Yanez parried it back at the floor, threw a low kick. You could see that Yanez was ready to counter. So Vinicius Salvador basically went to bullshit techniques. So he did the Rabona, the rare tactical Rabona. A Rabona is fucking soccer / football technique where you cross your legs over and you kick the ball behind you bring your back foot behind your front foot and kick the ball that way. It's really stupid, and there are very few practical applications of it in MMA because you can't kick a leg hard with it. You can only tap their leg and go, ha ha ha, did you see what I just did? And there was a fight, Lerone Murphy actually was in a fight with Ricardo Ramos, who's a very good fighter when he wants to be. But he also just finds one technique to obsess over. So he took the whole of the COVID period to learn the Rabona kick, showed it about 20 times, landed it every time, but of course it doesn't hurt because it's not like a full kick. It's just a little tap. And then Lerone Murphy bangs him out because, you know, you're just doing stupid stuff. The only practical application of it I've ever seen was Yair Rodriguez did it and then spun into an elbow on the same side, which was very cool. But there's no other like follow-ups to it that work. And then he did the stupid sliding kick, the Cody Garbrandt special, where you put your hand to the floor and you slide and kick him in the shin. And the commentators, normally DC and Joe Rogan, go, oh, what a weird kick. We've never seen that before, even though Cody Garbrandt does it at the start of every fight. And then he goes back to normal techniques, throws a low kick, and Adrian Yanez immediately steps in and knocks him out. Well, knocks him down and then pounds on him. Yeah, I mean, you know, standard Yanez looking smooth, unflusterable. Tends to cover up and like watch people a bit early on, but really good on the counter. And Vinicius Salvador, more of a flashy, ooh, look what a cool striker he is guy than like a technically sound striker. Anything else interesting on this card? No, it was mainly ridiculous. Abbas Magomedov went to the decision, and it was hard work, as you can imagine. There was a KO by tip punch in the third round where the girl like got... To be fair, Melissa Gatto had been body jabbing throughout the fight, and I always like that. You know, jab the body, jab the chest. You know, it's getting you close enough to touch the opponent and feeling comfortable so that you can throw the overhand across the top later. It's getting their hands to come down because they're annoyed by it. And if you're landing decently, you'll bruise them up, you'll tire them out, you know, to some degree. But yeah, she jabbed her in the titty in round 3, and Vidal stopped and went, ow, and like held her breast and looked at the referee like, are you seeing this? And then the other girl came in and continued punching for the finish. Yeah. Very funny. Ariana Carnellosi was losing a fight against Piera Rodriguez, who then headbutted her from closed guard. And as Mark Smith was telling her not to headbutt again, she headbutted her again. Immediate DQ. Very, very funny. And the best part was, like, she headbutted the girl, got warned, and while she was being warned, she headbutted her again. And then Mark Smith goes, "Stop! Go over there," to a neutral corner. And Piera Rodriguez stands up and goes, "Oh, drama now?" It's like, yeah, you dumb fuck. You were winning this fight, and now you're going home with half the money. Do you know what? I hope they fine her as well. I hope the commission, instead of fining Diego Lopez for having too much fun with his celebration, I hope they fine Piera Rodriguez for doing dumb shit. And that was about it. Pretty crap card. Bellator had a card on that was also mid, but there were a couple of fun moments on it. Cedric Doumbé knocked out Jaleel Willis. Don't know how good Jaleel Willis was, but he was shooting some bad takedowns from the start. He was like, he knew who Cedric Doumbé was, and he wasn't engaging in the stand-up at all, which just, quick rule, if you are the grappler in a matchup against a good striker, you do still need to be able to get close enough to throw some punches in order to attempt a takedown. You cannot be shooting like low singles from distance in MMA. We have no shoes and no friction. And the opponent is not obliged to wrestle with you. But Willis, when he actually, once he stopped shooting these bad takedowns and got up and started swinging, he actually gave a decent account of himself until Cedric Doumbé knocked him out, because Cedric Doumbé has bricks in his hands. But, this was in Paris. Doumbé is a massive star there. Very funny. His last fight was stopped due to splinter in the foot, which everyone was like, really? You can't continue with the splinter in the foot? No, it's not on Cedric Doumbé. It's on the promotion. That's extremely embarrassing to have like a piece of glass on the mat where people roll around. But he came out, and his entrance for this one, he was carrying the cordless Dyson. It was hilarious. Very funny guy. Costello Van Steenis submitted a guy with a Von Flu, and this was very funny because Gregory Barbane came out waving his hands in like a kung fu sort of style. I don't know if that's how he fights and he's just weird, or if he was being a dick, but he then promptly got taken down and mugged. And Mansour Barnui beat Yusuke Yachi. I mean, Yachi's fallen off a cliff, really. Like, he was promising for a while, and now he's not. I mean, he's 26-14, so... But this was a good performance from Barnui, I thought, because he's had trouble, just being the giggler guy, just being I've got this cool half-guard sweep, and then being aggressive on the feet, but very tall. But he was actually using his strengths a lot more here, because he's so tall and long. He was jabbing well with Yachi, who's trying to look for his big right hook across the top. He was beating him on the feet. What I've always liked about Barnui on the feet is that he used his knees and elbows really well, which is great if you're a tall guy, grab their head and just elbow the shit out of them. But he was using his jabs and his right straights to get into it well. And then he wrestled along the fence, which is something that he doesn't do very well, typically. But he got a fit in, which is like underhook, and then you put your other hand between their legs onto the fence. And that's sort of just like a they can't do anything position, and then you start trying to work from there. But he managed to just pick Yachi up like he was going to body slam him from there, like it was pro wrestling. And then he got a Das on Yachi, which was very cool because he doesn't really do that a lot. He is the rear naked choke man. But no being on his back, no snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, no giggler sweeps. Really solid performance in like a I came to win this MMA fight way. And then the main event was Patchy Mix versus Magomed Magomedov, which was actually, despite being a striking match between two grapplers, I thought they both looked pretty good. Patchy Mix got the split decision. A lot of people felt like Magomed Magomedov should have won. But the response from people online was like, oh, well, now we can stop saying this guy would hang in the UFC. It's like, no, they're both very good. Believe me, I love shitting on Bellator, but both these guys are very good. I mean, Magomedov already had two very competitive fights with Piotr Yan back in the day, but he's only gotten better, and Patchy Mix has looked great against very good fighters like Rofian Stotts, Kyoji Horiguchi. There was a great moment in the second round where Magomed Magomedov came in with his head a bit low. Patchy Mix snatched up the guillotine attempt. That's what he got Magomedov in their first fight. But he jumps the guard. Magomedov's head pops out, and immediately he's working onto one hip so that he can kick his way through to the half guard and start coming up on the underhook, rather than sitting there in closed guard being like, I'm the submission guy. He does a lot of things very well, Patchy Mix. And to be honest, this could be one of those performances where it's like he's been working on his striking and he just was, his confidence outran his ability. As happens with a lot of great grapplers. They work on their striking to the point that they're like, I'm a comfortable striker now, when it's really, you get back to the Damian Maia position where your striking is actually surprisingly good when you end up striking. Like, much better than it should be. Not world class by any means, but better than it should be. But you're still just like, everything is about getting on that single and doggedly getting that guy to the mat or jumping on his back. There was a glory event as well, which I was actually, the main event was pretty fun, but I'll talk about that on the Boycast. There's other kickboxing going on this week. The sumo's back, and it's like a young generation of guys just storming through the competition this time round. Teruno Fuji came out on the first day and got dominated, despite being the only Yokozuna competing, and he was like, right, I'm out now. I've never seen a man with more tape on his legs, apart from Sakuraba. Just bandages on his legs, like he's a leper. Anyway, I'm your boy Jack Slack. I'll be back later in the week to talk on the Boycast about fun stuff that interests me. If you like that, or if you like the sound of that, sign up to the Patreon, become a boy. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprime.com. I'm your boy, Jack Slack. Telling the corner that your opponent is breathing heavy and then getting choked out seconds later, bless.